I think I learned the most when I threw myself into the cold water. So there were many projects where I went to bed and was like, oh my God, how should I ever solve that? But if you stay optimistic about things and curious around the problem, then this kind of always worked out for me.
We just wrapped up a conversation with Thomas Schmidt, an analytics engineer at Metabase. In that discussion, he shared his career journey that led him into making it with data and shared a lot of the resources and thinking that got him into this role. I think this is something that will be really valuable for folks who are just getting started, or if you're in a place in your career where you want to break through to the next level. He's got a lot of wisdom and interesting ideas to share with you. But what I wanted to start off with was just a quick summary of sort of your career and your journey to, what many people would call making it in data. How'd you get started and how'd you end up at Metabase?
Oh yeah, that's a quite interesting journey. So my career didn't start in data at all. So I pivoted like still early in my career, I guess. But it was like if someone would have told me that during university studies, I would have said, yeah, you're crazy. So originally I studied agriculture science. So my parents had a dairy farm at home. Now we still have a few cows, no dairy anymore. And I was pretty excited about that topic. So after I graduated, I thought, let's go to university, study that topic, and dive a bit more into animal behavior and all those types of things. So I did a lot there and learned a lot. I was never into programming or something there. I think the craziest stuff that I did back in time was a few lines of R, or not even a few lines. I think I just heard about it in the statistics course. Yeah, and then when it came to my master thesis, I was working at a company that does automatic calf feeders. So where the small cows, they would get in, they get their portion of milk, and we wanted to analyze the data and do something nice out of it. So my task for the master thesis was predicting when calves get sick based on that data that we have from the feeder, from some activity measurement prototype, and so on. So yeah, so I started things off with Excel as you do it as a normal student without a lot of programming knowledge. My Excel file grew up to 100 of megabytes, and if I clicked somewhere, it just took 20 minutes to load and nothing happens. So I decided I need to change my approach. Went to the engineers, asked them whether they could help me. Nobody had time, and I was like, oh, okay, then I need to learn it on my own. So I did an R online course, which was like a small pirate course, super weird, but it was quite some fun. And then I realized that when I started to try to rewrite that Excel logic into that script, I made a click of a button and in less than a second, everything was calculated. And that was the moment where I was like, okay, that stuff is powerful. And while doing some research on how you do prediction things, I kind of naturally went into this area of machine learning. And that was just like a tool I wanted to use to solve the problem. So I tried to understand more about it, did a bunch of online courses and so on. Long story short, at a certain point in my agricultural career at this very beginning, after my master's thesis, I realized that this is a topic that was for me like opening door to data wonderland. And I got super excited, did a lot of online courses because I was so curious about it. And then I said to myself, hey, I think this is like the way I need to go. And then that's maybe a story for another time. Through some funny coincidences, I ended up at a small startup that still was doing something with agriculture, but it was my first job as a data analyst back in time, very, very broad. But that was kind of how I pivoted into the data science career. So nothing by training, rather just everything like self-taught and then learning by problems that that have been coming around on my path.
You brought up a couple of different things in there that I'm curious about, and you kind of outlined this journey that started off, with Excel and then moved into, sort of these more mature tools, and you talked a lot about like self-education that got you to that place and curiosity. Were there any resources or tools that you used? I mean, you mentioned this sort of pirate course, but do you have any recommendations or advice for somebody who was maybe on a similar journey to yourself, where they're finding the edges of what they can do in their Excel sheets?
Yeah, totally. So I think my number one advice is that just be curious about topics. And then in terms of where you can go, I think there are a couple of things. So there are a lot of really good blog posts you will find on things like Medium. There are a bunch of cool newsletters which are in the data space where you can like just read about things. There's a ton of free online courses around. So like from any types of providers, whether it's Coursera or Udacity or stuff like that. So that's where I also did a lot of those free online courses to kind of get some knowledge around a certain topic I was interested. So whether it was like just general data analysis, how to visualize data. Um, Another really great resource that I can recommend everybody going into the data world, whether it's like even for data engineering and stuff, I would recommend that, is a book called Storytelling with Data. I think I actually have it around. I have it around. So this one here, so we don't get paid for that, but that one is a book I think that's really helpful if you want to go into the data professionality, because this kind of challenges the way how you think about problems, how you think about telling a story with data. And that unlocked a lot of new ways of thinking about problems for me. So even if it's like a really high level thing, but communication is the most important part in your data role. Maybe not if you are a data engineer, but even their communication with other stakeholders and so on is very important. And this book was really helpful for me. So I think to sum it up, YouTube or like any kinds of like course providers, there's a lot of free online resources, blog posts on Medium. Then there are also some like other data science blogs that you find. So those types of things are really good resources, but don't try to artificially go into some direction. So try to maybe start with a problem, with a side project that you're interested in, and go from there, because this will naturally drive your curiosity when you have a problem at hand that you need to solve. I think this, at least for myself, this was the easiest way for me to learn. When there was a problem I needed to solve somehow, figure out the right tool for it and research specifically for that. That was always pretty helpful for me.
That's interesting. One of the things, and I heard this in a couple of the things you were saying, is there's lots of different names for working with data. There's data science, data analyst, data engineer, all these different titles and roles. It sounds like you kind of came into it organically with this problem-led kind of approach, and you've taken on a bunch of different areas. But maybe for someone who's just getting started, you could give a little summary of like, what are the major titles? What are the major career tracks look like for somebody who might be interested in a specific area of specialization?
Yes, yeah, that's a good one. So I start off trying to describe them in a high level, and then I will give a bunch of caveats to this whole separation of these titles as well. So I think there are a couple of interesting titles. So one of them might be a data analyst, where I guess your focus is mostly on analyzing data. So you might work very closely with stakeholders from sales, from product, depending on which type of company you're working at, maybe even finance, where it's a lot about here's some data or finding the right data sources, looking at them, finding insights from the data. Then there is also a older title already, which is the data engineer. That's for me always the person that tries to get data from A to B. So there are a bunch of tools that somewhat create data traces, or we ingest data from A to B into a data warehouse. That's usually something where data engineers are involved, especially in companies that are very specialized. And I will come to that in a second. There's also this job title of a analytics engineer that has evolved very recently. That's also my job title. The normal definition around an analytics engineer is that I think you would work very closely around data modeling. So you have data in your data warehouse or from different sources, and you try to bring them in a format that it's easy to work with for your stakeholders, whoever that might be. So that might be internal stakeholders, yourself, or maybe also the end users where the data is connected to a BI tool, and we want to make it easy for them to kind of make sense out of the data and be able to take decisions on it. And this analytics engineer sometimes also has aspects of a data analyst a bit. So it's kind of a mixture of a data analyst and a data engineer, how I understand it. So it's more like a broader role, I guess, that has evolved recently, especially with tools like DBT, where this whole data modeling approach goes more like kind of introduced a bunch of software engineering best practices. So it's you're kind of acting as an engineer to an extent, but it's more like a mixture role, I would say. And then there's the classical data scientist as well, where historically, I think data scientists have worked a lot like as scientists. So there was some kind of research aspect to it. And I think a huge part of it was like there were aspects of data analysis in there, but I think a big part was also this whole topic around machine learning, where I think these techniques had a lot of research components in it on how you come up with a final solution. So it's kind of an iterative approach that I think compares a bit to research, why the title scientist then also makes a bit more sense. However, I need to say, this data science thing, I think, is a really special case. So my titles also have been data scientist in a couple of companies, and depending on the company, this can be very, very different. So you might be in a company that is super like big already and has very specialized roles. So then maybe a data scientist does purely the machine learning stuff, and maybe you are even then a machine learning engineer. For those types of things. But especially in like startups, I think it's often the case that you might have the title of data scientist. That happened to me as well. But then it's usually a super broad understanding. So you would do anything from like the data engineering part, like bringing data from A to B, doing analysis, using machine learning if it's the right tool to solve a problem. So depending on the company size and how a company defines those roles, this can be very broad as well. And more like there sometimes is this term of a like T-shaped role coming up, where they say you're maybe specialized in a certain area. Maybe it's machine learning, maybe it's data analysis, but you have a broad knowledge, like the T basically, on all the other areas as well. So you kind of more like the generalist, which worked quite well for me as always in the past.
Yeah. Well, and turning a little bit more to some of the work that you're doing right now, I understand that, you've been more involved in a lot of the AI ML kind of stuff in your recent work. How has that sort of changed the space of the data career? Like what is the rise of that area of focus done to the career path kind of journey for data folks?
Yeah, it's getting super stressful. No, just kidding. So I think one part of this huge AI hype that we currently see. I mean, I always try to approach it in a certain way. Like with anything that comes up, it's the same for machine learning in the past and other things. Sometimes you have this hype phase, but what you really need to ask yourself is like, this is just a tool in my toolbox and I have a problem, and what is the right tool to solve the problem? And a lot of times the mistake that we make as humans is that there's something crazy new. So I have this hammer and now suddenly I try to see everything as a nail, and try to use that tool to solve any problem, or try to find a problem where this tool can be helpful. With the rise of AI, it's a super exciting topic, like everything that happens around these large language models, around agents. That's something where I'm also doing a lot of research. Why I call it stressful is there's just so much happening. So it's super hard to catch up with the latest stuff that's going on. On the other hand, it's also super exciting. So it feels like there's so much energy and motivation in like this whole community to solve problems and to get better at solving those problems. So I don't know, sometimes you see a new thing coming up on Twitter X or on LinkedIn where somebody posts about something, and then people go super crazy about trying to challenge those approaches. And I found that super exciting, like being on the edge of things and trying also maybe sometimes to figure out how to solve things that nobody solved yet. So that's something I found very exciting, to work on those very hard problems.
Awesome. Awesome. Turning back a little bit to more about the sort of career path into this, I know one of the big questions, or one of the things that a lot of people struggle with, is like landing that first job or feeling like they made it in data, quote unquote. In your experience, what are the things you can do that'll best equip you to, start having the conversations with the kind of organizations that are going to like want to hire you as a data scientist, data analyst, what have you?
Yes, yeah. So I totally can feel that struggle that people have there sometimes. It happened to me as well. So I was close to the point where I almost started like all of like freshly with a university degree again. And then I approached a startup where things worked out. So that's like one tip. I think usually in startups the barrier is lower. So they usually, if they see you have a lot of knowledge in like doing online courses, and maybe you have some pet projects, that's a good tip I can give you. So if you're curious, try to play with those tools. So if you do online courses, try to do your own things. Like there's a lot of data sets on Kaggle. There are Kaggle competitions where you can work with, but just be curious and try to apply the tools and learn for yourself. So I did the same, for example, when this whole ChatGPT thing came up. I tried to see like what products could I build, and that's usually a good way of learning and a good reference if you also apply for a job somewhere. In my experience at startups, it's a bit easier. They get more trust by just like being there and talking about what you did and showing stuff. In bigger companies, usually it might be that your resume already falls through the first iteration of scanning, because it's just like, I don't know, if I go there and I have an agricultural science degree and there's nothing about data science in there, yeah, why should they take me? So it's like kind of a natural selection that happens. And in startup, it's usually, I think, so for me, it was a good place to start. And I would also totally recommend this and do this again, because you need to be more the generalist there. So it forces you to learn a bit more about the space. And you will also quickly realize that you don't know that much yet. So when I came there, I was like, yeah, man, I did so many online courses. I'm the data science king. And then when I came there, I needed to learn that there's a lot more to learn, especially around communication, how you talk to stakeholders when they come to you and say, hey, Thomas, can you give me data X, Y, Z? I first needed to learn that in, I don't know, 80% of the cases, they need something very different to solve their problem. So you need to grow those skills as well to understand the problems that people are trying to solve, and how to get behind that and how to talk to people. So I think that's something which is hard to practice with pet projects. That's just something I guess you need to learn on the job as well. Yeah.
What do you think was most helpful in learning that skill set? Was it just hands-on working experience, or was there certain moments or exercises that you saw that you were like, oh man, I wish I'd known that like at the very beginning?
Yeah, I think this might have happened a couple of times to me. I think always when you look back, it's like, oh man, have I been stupid when I did X, Y, Z? That I think that happens a lot. On the other hand, it's a natural learning process. So I think for me, it was a lot of times. I think I learned the most when I threw myself into the cold water. So there were many projects where I went to bed and was like, oh my God, how should I ever solve that? But if you stay optimistic about things and curious around the problem, then this kind of always worked out for me. So I think learning from problems, so also like try to approach problems where you're not sure whether you can solve them. And work together with other smart people, like ask them for feedback, ask them about what they think. So don't work in isolation. That's really important, I think, in this whole data world. Try to find your community. There are maybe also some meetups where you could go to in person and talk to people, talk about your problem and exchange. That has been really helpful for me to kind of learn from those problems. Yeah, I mean, apart from that, I guess, as I said, there are some good books and resources out there, but usually you learn the most when you apply stuff, and also when you sometimes just bump into a wall. That's also good. So don't get demotivated. Try to also do some retros with yourself, like what did go well, what not. Talk with your team members about that, how they get your communication, what can you improve about it. I think that's like those typical classical tips that I would also give here.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, I'm going to turn the conversation now a little bit to some stuff that you can just react to and tell me what you think of it.
Okay.
So tell me about this. In 2012, Harvard Business Review named data science the sexiest career in the world. It's been over 12 years since that was the case. Is it still the sexiest career in the world?
I think so. For myself, at least speaking for myself, how I define, so for me, data scientist is always like more generalistic than some other people might think of it. But I think it depends on what you value. So I think what a lot of people have as a motivation to go into that area is money. So like you get crazy salaries, so that's why I want to go into that direction. That's maybe not the best motivation. So like, don't try to optimize for that. Obviously, it's a very important thing in your life to like have money for the living, but I would not try to optimize for it. Optimize more for personal interest. What I find very sexy in this data science world or in the data world in general is that there are so many different problems to solve. So I'm a real problem solver at heart. And there are so many interesting things where I'm not going there and doing the same thing every day, but every day there could be something totally crazy new that I never heard about. And I get to work with people like you from marketing and growth, and you have very like a lot of things that you think about and problems you need to solve that I've never heard about before, like certain terms and yeah, I don't know, approaches to things. And that's always in this. So when you then start to try to understand the problem of people, you also need to understand a bit about their context and what is this that they are trying to do. And this always feels to me like, I don't know, like opening new doors where I haven't been yet. It's like a nice exploration. And that's something I really love about the job. So you definitely don't get bored. And that's something that keeps me motivated and up every day, that I know that there will be new problems coming up, and they are all very interesting. And on the way, I likely learn a lot. So that's what I optimize a lot for, is for my personal learning, since I'm a very curious person. And when I can learn new things, that's something that where I have this natural motivation. And then like work is not work. Work is like kind of a mixture between like fun and yeah, I also earn my money with it. If you find something like this is the best kind of situation in your life. This is why for me, data science is still, I guess, the sexiest job.
Awesome. And then I had one more, which is, when I look at a lot of the videos that are like, hey, how to start in data in 2025, do this, sometimes people have the dark joke that you shouldn't. What do you say to people who say that 2025 is a terrible time to get started in data?
That's a really good question. So I don't know what's on the horizon with this whole AI hype. I'm sometimes thinking, will there be a day where maybe my job will be replaced by an AI agent? So maybe not in 2025, but maybe after that. So that's definitely a risk, I guess, for a few, especially for repetitive things. On the other hand, if you stay up to date with like those types of topics, I think there's still a great chance that you can maybe be one of those persons who replaces others. a bit rough to say, but I think in a positive way. So where you can help people get rid of the repetitive task and focus on the real stuff. So this is why I think it's still interesting, but I guess it really depends on what area and how crazy you focus on something. So maybe ask yourself whether this thing will still be relevant in 1 or 2 years. On the other hand, if you have fun during that 1 year where it's relevant and you like can catch up with some other things as an alternative, why not? So, optimize, really try to optimize for your interest, for like things that align with your personal life goals. Because if you have a job like that, it's just super easy to be good in.
Awesome. Thanks, Thomas. Appreciate it.
Welcome.
Where can we learn more and follow you for your thinking and work?
Yeah, so I think if you follow Metabase closely, you will always see parts of my work, hopefully. And then I think from time to time I post stuff on LinkedIn. Sometimes I'm doing blog posts on various places, but I think LinkedIn is a good place to follow me. I'm not super active on Twitter, former Twitter, now X. From time to time I also post some stuff there, but I think mostly you will find some content from myself on the LinkedIn side. So yeah, feel free to follow me there, and hopefully I can also inspire you for a couple of projects and things in your life.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Thomas, for your sharing your time and your stories. Before we go, is there anyone you want to shout out or any materials or references that you want to share with the community?
Yeah, maybe there's one particular set of persons I would like to thank. So when we think back about the beginning of our conversation and this first startup where I started my career, I'm very thankful that they gave me this opportunity. So maybe that's worth a shout out, especially since there was this fun telephone conversation that I had with this CTO we also have been talking about, who always chooses very fun words. And when we had this phone call initially, I thought that he's just trying to get rid of me. but it was a really funny coincidence that they were talking about getting new people in data, and then I was calling 5 minutes later. So big shout out to those guys. I think you enabled a lot of my career by providing me that trust. And I hope that other people out there will also bring that trust to folks in your company, in your team, because this can really help people grow.
Awesome. Well, thanks much, and stay tuned. We'll be back with more. Bye.
Bye.